Mówisz, Ania, mieszkają, ale ho hanu, ze kujata. Hos hanu, du jest ze kujata. One of the greatest, I think, burglaries, I'll call it a burglary, that has ever happened is when people who are different meet and they remain mental. If one is mental, usually the other is going to really resist that and fight with it and then maybe even become mental themselves. But the conditioning of colonization is a very civilized, well-planned, highly effective way in which someone has fooled themselves to thinking they can control something.
Mm-hmm.
And climate change is just a glimpse at there's no control, not by humans. The human control is in the heart, the places that we can feel. And what it makes you feel, if it makes you cry, that's great. Cry then, and find out what those tears are all about.
It's hard to pinpoint it, but if you grow up in a city like Houston, you're just kind of immersed in oil and gas, petro culture. And my parents actually, I was telling Sebi, come from another similar place in West Texas called Big Spring and Forsan, and it's smack dab in the middle of the Permian Basin, where there's been drilling since the 30s and 40s, and even to this day, it continues. So incidentally, it's just been in my life, since oil and gas really has been a part of this country.
Yeah.
And growing up near the refineries and the chemical plants, we're about 2 miles from the beginning of the Houston Ship Channel, and it stretches for 17, 18 miles, but just on land. It goes further out into the water, so you have all these big boats and barges, and then it circles around Galveston Bay. So this is ever present, and it's a part of everything here. You can imagine how much influence the port has on the city. And, it really became a city because of the discovery of oil nearby and the development of the combustible engine and the world wars. So this place has just sort of always been at the epicenter of war and discovery and conquest.
Yeah.
And it continues, it's a really interesting place.
It's a big intersection.
the soil is contaminated. All of the chemicals and runoff that happened during the storm got flushed out into the bay and into the Gulf. So now it's polluting, the seafood and, all of the folks that rely on that for jobs or sustenance or recreation or sport. Now they have to think about whether or not it's safe to eat the seafood or how much to eat. And that almost happened even with Ike. What this storm was different because it had already made landfall near Corpus Christi and it just hovered over us. So it was just raining from above. So we've seen now many different ways that the storms can impact this area.
Right.
And they're not prepared for any of them. I don't know that you can be. I mean, you're going to raise all of these industries 20 feet up, put them on stilts like they want to do the homes? No.
Not going to happen.
You're going to build big-ass levees? That's not going to protect them from, 50 inches of rain from above. You're going to build a big shed over? No, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do except, pray that that doesn't happen. So any of the projects that they proposed don't fully protect the facilities or the people around them. It's this is what we built. This is the world that we made. And they're proud of it.
It's their justification, basically.
Even in the face of all of the problems that it's caused and all of the death and sickness that it's caused. It's that's all they have to point to. This is America's, this is what it built. So that's the monument. This is the Houston Ship Channel. And I think it's just sort of a good way of beginning to look at the work that needs to be done. It's not just environmental education. It's history, it's cultural, and it's remembering. It's is this what we want to be proud of in 100 years? Is this what we want to talk about and bring our children to? Really, this? Not me.
Yeah.
Close to the river, the Rio Grande.
The Rio Grande?
Yes, in Albuquerque. It runs through all of the pueblos, most of the pueblos in this area, and we all, have a deep connection to the river. It's our water source. It's also a place of prayer for us, cleansing and giving back. So I'm part of this group called the Pueblo Action Alliance that came out of Standing Rock. The group needed to find a place to kind of take all the donations and have a system for that. And so now that Standing Rock, isn't there, Pueblo Camp isn't there anymore, we try to do our work in the communities now. So all the water protectors that went to Standing Rock, we have this connection. We all came together for whatever reason, but it's to protect the water. And I believe it's very important that we also still protect the water within us. The advice I would give would be to protect yourselves. And so going in prayer, put a shield around yourself before you get to that environment, because you don't know what you'll face there. And also to leave it there before you go back home to your community, because I think sometimes there's some difficult things that go on when you're at the front lines, and you want to be safe for yourself and for your family. So also kind of like uncloaking that and leaving it there. You're going to go home with the ideas and inspiration and awareness, but you don't want to go home with the negativity that you might also encounter. You know, having that spiritual connection or component or respect for one another, we can have those hard discussions and leave them be and still go out as friends, you know, conquer the world together.
I love what you were saying about how you went to Standing Rock to pray, and how praying, being there, was a form of being on the front lines, but you had to protect your family. That's why you were cooking on the day of the attacks. Could you tell us more about that?
Okay.
Again, that balance of how you were on the front lines, but also were a mother.
Yes, that is so cool, because we went to Standing Rock to pray. I didn't go to fight. I didn't go to put myself in a vulnerable position because I have family. I'm a mother of 6, and I took 5 of my family members up there to pray, and we took our cornmeal. We went to the sacred fire, and we prayed because of the beautiful unity of everyone coming together, all colors, all tribes. It was so beautiful to be in that position and to just have this spiritual being. It wasn't conducive to being to fighting. You know, I didn't want to put myself in the position of getting, you know, hurt because I have family to take care of. And so the way I did it is through prayer and through cooking. I cooked my traditional tortillas and cheese back from home, and our water protectors from Pueblo Camp just loved that. The piece of like remembering home cooked meals, well, they had been up there for months sacrificing, was healing for them, and it was healing for me to be able to offer that to them. And so that was my way of helping out.
Hos hamo tuesse quianta. Hos tua Americana.
Bác có thấy nhiều dầu hay gì nước bác dầu loan nữa nó sẽ bác đi ra sâu không?
Sâu lắm, đi xa lắm, đi gần tới Mobile luôn.
Vậy hả? Oh, okay. So he went further. He went pretty far out, right, deep into the Gulf, and he said that they could see like oil and sheens of oil, right? And then he worked for several weeks, and of course, you know, NOAA, the National Oceanic Administration, you know, they closed part of the Gulf down, right? And so he didn't do any more fishing that year. No oyster harvesting because they shut down the oyster reefs later that fall, and then also no shrimping the rest of that year. Yeah. And then he said since then it's been very, very like sparse fishing, particularly about the oyster reefs. Yeah, it's really decimated the displaced fishermen who harvest oysters. See, BP was like a huge environmental disaster, and you're not only talking about impacts to the water and fisheries and habitats, but people's health, because people are part of the ecosystem environment, right? Sometimes that's not well understood or acknowledged, right? So, but there's been folks like fishermen and other coastal residents who became sick. Yeah, but it's very hard because we don't have like a very strong public health system in the Gulf, let alone like occupational environmental health. So some folks, it's difficult to get the proper medical diagnosis, let alone treatment. So there's a lot of concerns, and the thing is, like, for communities who, like he was saying that about the fishing community in South Carolina, those of us who depend on like healthy natural resources environment, where the environment is being degraded or disappearing, those communities will too. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, it would. Yeah, particularly those who's like have like a really strong connection to the environment. And I'll use example going back to like an oyster reef. An oyster reef is like a habitat for oysters. It also where other species, marine life grows. It filters the water, so it helps keep the water clean. But it's also a source of livelihood for many fishermen and fishing communities. And if those reefs like are not healthy, productive, and decimated, those communities will gradually go away too.
Well, I know in talking with elders that there was always supposed to be a time when we would fight the two black snakes, right? And that one black snake would be easier to kill than the other. And we also knew that that was the time when people would have to make a decision about where things were going to go. We never, as far as I know, we never got the answer of what the decision was going to be. I think it's still being played out, but everything that I've seen that definitely falls in line with that. And I can see like the seventh generation of people like standing up. Like I think it's my kids, man, because they're tough. Like my daughter's suing the government for inaction on climate change. She's 14 years old.
Oh, she's one of the plaintiffs in that case.
Yeah, I mean it's like all these, but it's not just them. Think about the kids that are working on gun issues. It doesn't matter. Like you see these kids standing up and taking control. I feel like me personally, I'm just in line holding that space for them to come through. Like I think this all started way before any of us were thought of, and I think it'll go way past that, right? Standing Rock, like us, was just another link and another part of that protection that's been happening for generations upon generations.
Challenges or some of the biggest things that I've noticed on this trip is like when I mention Gullah Geechee people, no one knows who we are. Like, no one knows where we come from. No one knows that we've ever existed or even still exist. And I imagine, with you being one of the lead custodians of that culture and that narrative, that when people come through that door, they may or may not have any context as to like what it means to be Gullah and be Geechee. If you could, in a few words, share how you respond to that when people ask you who are the Gullah Geechee people, what is your most common response?
Well, when they ask who the Gullah Geechee people are, first I have to give them a little background. And that background is to inform them that the Gullah and Geechee people were responsible for the economic development of the Carolina colony, which extended from North Carolina-Virginia border to about 110 miles south of the Georgia-Florida border, about 10 miles north of St. Augustine, Florida. And then I tell them how the Gullah people brought all the knowledge for the rice culture here, and then brought the knowledge of processing indigo here. Without their knowledge, South Carolina would have been the poorest of the 13 colonies. But because of the knowledge they brought with rice and indigo, South Carolina became the second wealthiest of the 13 colonies. And then explained to them how, without the help of the Gullah Geechee people, in the role they played in the military, South Carolina, Georgia, and North Carolina may not have remained under British control after sometime during 1670 to 1740, because they played a major role in the military. And then in the 17 up to 1740, they were eventually a majority of the military, and without the role they played, they would not have been able to successfully defend this colony. That's the bottom line I give them. And then something to really raise their eyes is that all of these individuals have seen Western or cowboy movies, but they're unaware of the fact that 60 to 70% of those cowboys they saw in those Western movies should have been black cowboys, because black cowboys were developed here in South Carolina and went to the cattle trails from Texas to Kansas, because they taught the Europeans here how to use the African open land cattle grazing methods. So these are the things that they have to become aware of to know how important the Gullah people and the Geechee people were.
Okay.
That kind of gives you a good view.
Yeah.
If you're talking about the sheer volume of land, helps you be able to place the sheer volume of
Gotcha.
people on the land. You
Exactly.
understand what I'm saying?
So good perspective.
So that gives you a good up in your face kind of look at Rice. Hello.
Hello.
And
Okay.
how much it encompassed this area.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I think that one of the things that we are in danger of is becoming totally irrelevant before we become relevant. Because so many people don't understand Gullah Geechee culture, don't even know about Gullah Geechee culture, and the huge impact that the ancestors of Gullah Geechee people had on not only the wealth of this country, but the land of this country. So I think that's one of the things that we have to be concerned about, is not becoming irrelevant or extinct before people really realize and understand who we are and the scope of work that we represent. You know what I'm saying? So if you think about the rice from an environmental standpoint, you mean we don't even talk about the literal landscape change that had to happen to this area called Georgetown and the low country of South Carolina before one grain of rice was even planted. I mean, we had 40,000 acres of rice fields in Georgetown County alone. 40,000 acres, a little less than 900 miles of hand-dug, hand-dredged canal systems in this area. And so that means that you had virgin cypress lands that were totally cleared of hardwood, ancient trees, and you had canals that were built in swampy areas to redirect water from 6 rivers in this area. So just the landscape change alone is phenomenal. And some people equate the amount of land moved to that of the land moved to build pyramids in Egypt. So that ain't no damn joke.
Shit.
That ain't no joke at all. So just from an environmental standpoint. So if you think about that then, and think about some of the things that we are dealing with now in terms of flooding, and changing changing sea levels, how that impacts the land that has already been impacted by 300 years of a single crop. You can kind of, if people decided to study it and deal with it, you can kind of work backwards and figure out what you done.
What is it like walking around here compared to like when you're on my land in New Mexico?
There's a frequency. There's a frequency to both of those spaces, man. I think but this resonance here is like, probably the heaviest thing about this is thinking about the people who thought about me like hundreds of years ago in this space, thinking about their future, thinking about my existence, and what possible better world they would want for me.
Is that a little turtle? Oh, look, a little turtle. It's a turtle. It's a turtle.
He's saying, welcome home.
Hey.
Welcome home, Sammy.
Oh, it's a little terrapin. Oh, no. Sorry.
I've never seen a turtle like that.
Yeah, it's a terrapin.
Oh, yeah.
Getting some wind here. That red-roofed building across the way is Mount Vernon. That's the home of George Washington. So we are locked in a gaze of George Washington's home and us. If we had been here before Europeans, this river would be deep and clear, and it would be extensively old growth forest. But most of the forest you see here, it's all secondary because it was all cleared for farmland with European invasions. So when you see like wooded areas, that's not the way things were, maybe even like 75, 80 years ago. They would have been pretty clear. But before that, you would have seen much deeper, clearer rivers. It's so silted, it's brown, right? It's not clear. So the erosion is a major issue. But there's a lot that's being restored. Beavers have come back. They were gone for a long, long time. And that changes the way things are. Eagles have come back. That's through a lot of work. That's through a lot of work and concerted effort. It's really, really ironic. I mean, you have this space. This was supposed to be Blue Plains sewage treatment plant. In Washington, D.C., the sewage, it was slated to be the sludge sewage processing pit for the D.C. area. But because it's across from Mount Vernon, it was part of this move to create Piscataway National Park. And that's why, you see all this development everywhere around. Why is this place not developed? Why is this place spared? And We could say all kinds of reasons. Is it spirit? Is it worthy? It's also because it's interlocked with the history of the very foundations of this system. And we are in a gaze of the known and the unknown, the visible, the invisible, the erasure and the present, right? Of what's real history and who are we.
It's your feet making marks on the earth. And somebody else can see it and go, oh, who was this? Well, that's who we are as tribal people around the world. We can find out about others by the print they leave on the earth. That's what's so beautiful. It's not in our heads. You're not going to learn it in a book. You're not going to learn it because somebody's got a PhD. I have a PhD. It's a post hole digger down there in where my tools are. Yeah. That's how you learn. Yeah. That is a beautiful thing about belonging to tribal people. You can't leave that memory behind. I don't care what happens. Something comes along and it shocks you. And your eyes open, your ears open, you feel something differently and you don't know what it is exactly and you carry it. You got something in your pocket. You don't even know what it is.
Don't even know what it is.
You put your hand down in your pocket and you go, there it is, there it is. What the heck is that? What is that? And little at a time, it just begins to come back. The memory isn't lost. It's not about something in your mind. It's a feeling. And when you meet people, it's not like you're thinking, it's your feeling.